He was 5 minutes away from giving his valedictorian speech, but ended up face down on the pavement with a taser in his back. Why? Because he fit the description. Now the whole town is choosing sides, and the bodycam footage just leaked. Where are you watching from, and what time is it right now? Let us know in the comments. This story is about to get intense. The sun was already beginning to rise over the small town of Ridgecrest, and the high school gymnasium was decorated with navy blue streamers, silver balloons, and banners that read, "Congratulations, class of 2025. Folding chairs were neatly arranged in long, perfect rows, and the sound crew was doing last-minute mic checks. It was graduation day, the moment every student had worked so hard for. But for 17-year-old Jordan Mitchell, it was more than a celebration. It was his future. Jordan had been named valedictorian just a week earlier. Straight A's, captain of the debate team, dual enrollment at the local college, and over 200 hours of community service. He wasn't just graduating. He was shining. And today, he was supposed to give a speech in front of the entire town. His mom had ironed his gown the night before. His dad had taken the day off from work. His little sister wrote, "Jordan is a legend," in sparkly letters on a poster board. Everyone was ready. Everyone except the world outside. At 8:03 a.m., Jordan left the house, fully dressed in his cap and gown. The cords for academic honors hung proudly around his shoulders. In one hand, he carried a slim folder with his speech. In the other, a small gift wrapped in red paper and gold ribbon. He was planning to get it to his favorite teacher before the ceremony. But as he crossed the parking lot of a corner gas station near his school, things took a sharp, terrifying turn. Officer Brent Kane was parked on the edge of the lot, finishing up paperwork from a routine patrol, when a call came through dispatch. Unit 3. We got a 10 to 16 at Eagle Express Mart. Possible robbery. Suspect fled on foot, black male, medium build, dark clothing, possibly armed. That was all it took. Jordan, walking briskly across the lot in full graduation attire, didn't hear the sirens. He didn't even see the police cruiser pull up fast behind him. But the second he turned around, he was staring down the barrel of a yellow TASER gun. On the ground. Officer Kane shouted, "Now! Get on the ground." Jordan froze. "What? What's going on?" "On the ground. Sir, I'm just trying to get to my graduation." But Officer Kane didn't wait. He didn't ask for ID. He didn't radio in a confirmation. He didn't even notice the cap on Jordan's head. He saw brown skin, a male figure, and something shiny in his hand, a gift box. And he fired. The electrical current surged through Jordan's body, dropping him instantly to the pavement. His cap flew off. His speech folder crumpled beneath him. His cords twisted beneath his arms as he writhed in pain, trying to understand what was happening. A bystander, an older woman pumping gas nearby, screamed, "He's just a kid! What are you doing?" Officer Kane didn't flinch. He barked into his radio. Suspect detained. Possible weapon in possession. The weapon was a gift, a mug that said "World's Best Teacher." Moments later, more units arrived. Paramedics were called. They lifted Jordan from the ground, still twitching slightly, and asked him his name. He whispered it through clenched teeth. "Jordan Mitchell, I didn't do anything." At 8:15 a.m., the principal called Jordan's house, wondering why their top student hadn't arrived yet. His mother was still tying ribbons on the chairs when her phone rang. She didn't even grab her purse before sprinting out the door. Within the hour, the video hit the internet. Someone had recorded the entire incident from across the street. A shaky, vertical phone clip showing a tall black teenager being tossed in broad daylight while wearing graduation cap. His body hit the concrete with a sickening thud. His arms never lifted in resistance. The caption read simply, "This what you get for walking while black." Hashtag Ridgecrest PD, hashtag Justice for Jordan. It took less than 3 hours to trend on Twitter. By noon, Ridgecrest High School's front lawn was covered in reporters and students holding handmade signs. He was supposed to be our valedictorian. He had a 4.2 GPA. He's not a threat. The local police department issued a generic statement. "We are aware of an incident involving a minor and a responding officer. The matter is under internal review. But there was one key detail missing from every police memo. The original robbery suspect had visible face tattoos and a shaved head, two things Jordan very obviously didn't have. He had a short afro, clean skin, and a name well known to everyone in town, except, apparently, to the man who pulled the trigger on a weapon designed to disable criminals. That afternoon, Jordan lay in a hospital bed, his body sore, heart pounding, and future in limbo. His mother sat beside him, one hand over his, the other covering her own mouth to keep from crying aloud. Her son wasn't just a victim. He was a symbol of something deeper, something that had always simmered beneath the surface in their town, but was now boiling over. That night, a candlelight vigil was held outside Ridgecrest Police Department. Hundreds gathered. Some brought candles, others brought anger, and somewhere in the crowd, someone asked a question that would echo all week. If this can happen to the best of us, what does that say about the rest of us? Officer Kane was placed on administrative leave. Paid, of course. Jordan missed his graduation. Instead of walking across the stage to applause, he sat at home in silence, watching the replay of his own assault online. Over and over, the same grainy video. Over and over, the same disbelief in his eyes before he dropped to the ground. And then, as the hours passed, the spin began. Anonymous commenters claimed Jordan had been acting suspicious. Local Facebook groups lit up with rumors. Why was he running? Why didn't he comply faster? Maybe there's more to the story. But those who knew Jordan didn't buy it for a second. His teachers rallied. His classmates posted their own memories. Stories about how he tutored underclassmen in math, helped fix an elderly neighbor's broken fence, started a food drive in junior year. The kind of things that should have been in the local paper for all the right reasons. But now, they were part of a different headline. The next morning, Jordan finally spoke. He posted a video to his private Instagram page, just 1 minute long, filmed from his hospital bed, eyes still puffy, cord still attached to his chest. His voice trembled as he spoke. I wasn't doing anything wrong. I was just being me. I was trying to be someone my little sister could be proud of. I worked hard. I followed every rule. And still it didn't matter. The video was shared over 2 million times in 24 hours. News outlets across the country picked up the story. CNN, NBC, even international platforms. Jordan Mitchell, the honor student tossed on his graduation day, had become a national name, a symbol of what happens when you do everything right and still get treated like a criminal because of your skin. But the real question loomed larger than any headline. Why did Officer Kane target him in the first place? Was it panic? Prejudice? Pura negligence? Or something even deeper? Something systemic? No one from Ridgecrest PD was willing to answer that question. Not yet. And so, the town waited. Jordan waited. The country waited. For bodycam footage. For accountability. For a sign that this wasn't just going to be another story swept under the rug. But the truth was already out there. In a shaky phone video. In the cries of his mother. In the quiet dignity of a boy who just wanted to deliver his speech. And somewhere in a dark police evidence locker, there was a memory card. Containing every second of what happened before, during, and after the moment Jordan hit the pavement. A memory card that someone didn't want released, because if it ever saw the light of day, people might stop asking if this was racial profiling, and start asking why it keeps happening. And they'd be right to ask. Because Jordan Mitchell wasn't just a student. He was a mirror, and what he reflected back was a truth this country still struggles to face. And it all started with a gift in one hand, a cap on his head, and a taser to his back. By the time the sun rose the next morning, Ridgecrest wasn't just a quiet town caught in controversy. It was the epicenter of a growing storm. Hashtags like hashtag Justice for Jordan and hashtag TASER for graduating were trending across social media platforms. Cable news vans lined the street outside the Mitchell household. Jordan's parents had to close the blinds to keep reporters from snapping pictures through the windows. The neighborhood, once peaceful and predictable, now felt like the background of a national reckoning. Inside the Mitchell home, things were quiet, but not calm. Jordan sat at the kitchen table, a heating pad on his shoulder, scrolling silently through messages on his phone. There were hundreds, some from classmates, others from complete strangers. Some were supportive, some were angry, and a few were chilling. Should have just listened, but he's not as innocent as they say. Another thug pretending to be a scholar. Jordan's mom, Denise, watched him from across the room. She wanted to rip the phone out of his hand, to erase all the cruel words and keep her son from carrying the weight of other people's ignorance. But she knew Jordan. He wasn't the type to look away. Even when the truth was ugly, he faced it head on. That's what always made him different. That's what made her proud. And that's what scared her the most. Across town, Officer Brent Kane was sitting in a mandatory meeting with Internal Affairs. A closed-door session, away from the cameras and protesters. His uniform had been turned in, his badge temporarily suspended, but his attitude? Unchanged. He called it a misunderstanding, said he acted on instinct, claimed he had reasonable cause to assume Jordan was the suspect. But there was a problem with that story. Jordan wasn't wearing dark clothing. His graduation gown was maroon. He wasn't running. He was walking at a steady pace. He wasn't hiding. He was holding a bright red gift box in plain view. And he absolutely wasn't the man with the face tattoo seen in surveillance footage from the store just minutes before. Still, Officer Kane held firm. He matched the description, he insisted. I didn't know who he was at the time. But if that was true, why didn't he check? Why didn't he ask a single question before pulling the trigger on a weapon made to incapacitate? That same morning, the Ridgecrest Police Department held a press conference. The chief of police, a stern-faced man in his late 50s, stood behind a podium, flanked by stone-faced officers. Cameras clicked. Microphones pointed. We take this matter seriously, he said flatly. We understand the concerns of the community and are launching a full investigation. But when a reporter asked if Officer Kane had a prior record of complaints, the chief dodged. We don't discuss personnel matters publicly. When asked if the Bodycam footage would be released, he said, at this time, no. And when asked if Jordan would receive an apology, there was silence. That silence said everything. By noon, students at Ridgecrest High organized a walkout. Hundreds of them left class and gathered in front of the school, holding signs that read, Black excellence is not a threat, and we are all Jordan. Several teachers joined them. Even the assistant principal stood nearby, quietly wiping tears from her cheeks as she watched her students speak truth into a microphone Jordan should have been holding on graduation day. At the center of the crowd was a girl named Elise, a junior and president of the Black Student Union. She held up her phone and read Jordan's valedictorian speech aloud. His words echoed over the lawn, powerful and bittersweet. I believe in hard work. I believe in community. I believe that we rise together or not at all. The crowd fell silent. It was the speech of someone who believed in change, even before he became the face of it. Meanwhile, pressure was building online. Civil rights activists picked up the story. Influencers and public figures reposted Jordan's video. Calls for accountability spread beyond Ridgecrest to city halls and school boards across the country. A petition to release the Bodycam footage reached 250,000 signatures in just 2 days. Still, the footage remained locked away. Inside his home, Jordan tried to keep his routine normal. He still made his bed, still helped his sister with homework. But everything had changed. Strangers now knew his face. Reporters shouted his name. And somewhere deep in the back of his mind, he couldn't stop replaying the moment the taser hit his back. The sound, the jolt, the confusion, the fear. It came back every time he closed his eyes. His father, Mark, tried to keep things steady. He fielded calls from lawyers, managed media requests, and kept the family together like the quiet backbone he'd always been. But even he was shaken. He had grown up during a different era, had seen protests in the 90s, had watched Rodney King on the news, had felt his own stomach drop more than once during routine traffic stops. But this was his son, his boy, and it didn't matter that Jordan had done everything right. That night, something unexpected happened. A young officer from the Ridgecrest PD, Officer Amanda Reyes, reached out anonymously to a local journalist. She said she'd seen the bodycam footage, said she was tired of the silence. She didn't leak the footage, but she gave a detailed account of what was on it. According to her, the footage showed Officer Kane pulling up behind Jordan without turning on his lights, approaching him without announcing himself, and then, without a word of explanation, drawing his taser, aiming at Jordan's back, and fire within 10 seconds of contact. The kicker? Jordan never once resisted. In fact, when he heard someone shout, "Hey!" from behind, he turned, smiled, and said, "Oh, hey, are you here for graduation too?" That's what he said right before he hit the pavement. The leaked testimony sparked outrage, not just because of what was described, but because it proved something people had feared all along. This wasn't about a mistake. This was about assumptions. Assumptions rooted in race, in bias, in fear. The journalist who received the tip published a full statement online, protecting the officer's identity. The article went viral within hours. Now, the Ridgecrest PD couldn't hide anymore. Under pressure, the mayor called an emergency town hall. The gymnasium, ironically, the same one where graduation had been scheduled, was packed. Jordan's parents were there. So were students, teachers, residents, and activists from neighboring cities. On one side sat supporters of Jordan. On the other, defenders of law enforcement. The mayor stepped to the microphone. "We cannot change what happened, but we can change what happens next." Then came the big announcement. The city would release the bodycam footage within 48 hours. The crowd erupted. Some cheered, some wept, and some, like Jordan's mother, simply closed their eyes, knowing the footage would hurt, but hoping it would help. But behind the scenes, something else was happening. Inside the Ridgecrest Police Department, not everyone was thrilled. Rumors swirled about officers deleting internal emails. Whispers about someone trying to tamper with the footage. And in one dark corner office, a man who had once called himself a protector of the people stared at a screen, watching his own mistake play out frame by frame. Officer Kane hadn't expected this. He thought the town would move on, that the outrage would fade, that Jordan Mitchell would be just another footnote. But now, his name was being dragged through headlines, and he was no longer the one in control. The countdown to the footage release had begun. Outside Jordan's house, candles lined the sidewalk. Letters poured in from students across the country. Some sent copies of their own graduation speeches. Others simply wrote, "You matter." And Jordan, who had once planned to leave Ridgecrest quietly for college in the fall, was now the heartbeat of a movement he never asked to lead. But even with the support, the messages, and the national attention, there was still something missing. Closure. Because no matter how many people stood with him, no matter how loud the chant outside City Hall became, Jordan still hadn't heard 3 simple words from a man who tossed him without reason. "I am sorry." And deep down, he doubted he ever would. As the sun set on Ridgecrest once again, the town stood on the edge of something bigger than itself. The footage was coming. The truth, unfiltered and undeniable, was about to be exposed. And when it did, people would be forced to confront the question they'd been avoiding all week. If this had happened to Jordan Mitchell, who's next? The answer wouldn't come from a press release. It would come from a cold, sharp footage of a camera mounted to a uniform, a lens that saw everything, and a silence that, until now, had protected those who needed to be held accountable. But the silence was ending, and justice was finally knocking at the door. The town of Ridgecrest was holding its breath. Every street corner buzzed with whispers. Every classroom paused at the mention of Jordan's name. Coffee shops had stopped playing background music. People were glued to their phones. It wasn't just curiosity anymore. It was tension, thick, palpable, and spreading far beyond the borders of a single zip code. 48 hours. That's what the mayor had promised. The bodycam footage would be released publicly, unedited, unblurred, unfiltered. Jordan didn't sleep the night before. How could he? He was about to watch the moment he lost a sense of safety, played back in high definition, dissected frame by millions of strangers online. It was like knowing your worst moment was scheduled to premiere on national television. The trauma wasn't just internal anymore. It was about to become entertainment, debate, even clickbait. But still, he sat in silence, staring at the TV in the living room, waiting. His father stood behind him, arms folded. His mother sat beside him, holding his hand. And when the clock hit 4 p.m., the footage went live. The screen flickered, then opened to a dashcam view of Officer Kane pulling up slowly behind a pedestrian. The timestamp showed it was just before 7 p.m. The sun was still out. It was Jordan, clear as day, in his graduation gown, earbuds in a red box in his hands. The first thing viewers noticed? Officer Kane never turned on his lights, never announced his approach. Then came the bodycam angle. He opened the door, took 3 wide steps toward Jordan. No greeting, no warning. And just as Jordan turned, smiling, opened his mouth to say something, the pop of the taser crackled through the speakers. Jordan's body seized, his arms jolted, the gift box fell, and he collapsed on the pavement. Hard. There were no slurs, no shouts, just an eerie silence, followed by the sound of Jordan groaning in confusion and pain. Then came the words from Kane. Stop resisting. But Jordan wasn't moving. He never resisted anything. The footage stopped. The screen went black. And in that moment, there was no room for interpretation, no justification to hide behind. The truth wasn't abstract anymore. It was raw, visible, inarguable. The reaction was instant. Social media exploded. The footage was reposted millions of times. Celebrities called it chilling. Legal analysts labeled it excessive force. And civil rights attorneys called for the immediate termination and arrest of Officer Brent Kane. News outlets ran the footage back to back. Some pixelated Jordan's face out of respect. Others didn't. But every outlet had the same headline in one form or another. Graduating valedictorian ties without cause. Ridgecrest City server crashed from the volume of traffic trying to access the video. But while the world watched in horror, something else was happening offline. Protesters began gathering outside the Ridgecrest Police Department. Not dozens, but hundreds. Some were locals. Others had traveled from nearby cities. They chanted Jordan's name, held signs that read "Taz for walking" and "Accountability now." They weren't just angry. They were focused, organized, unrelenting. Inside the station, Officer Kane wasn't speaking. He'd lawyered up. The department issued a sterile statement. We are reviewing all findings and cannot comment on ongoing personnel matters. It was a coward sentence, and the public knew it. That night, the Ridgecrest City Council convened behind closed doors. Word leaked that several members were furious, not just at the footage, but at the fact that the department had kept it hidden for nearly a week. There was talk of a city-wide audit. There was even whisper of a federal investigation. Meanwhile, Jordan sat quietly at home, phone off, headphones on, watching a childhood video of himself performing in a school talent show. It was from the 3rd grade. He wore a bow tie too big for his neck and nervously sang a Michael Jackson song in front of a smiling crowd of parents. He didn't recognize that kid anymore. And yet, in some painful way, he knew that innocence had been slipping long before Officer Kane ever pulled his taser. It wasn't a single moment. It was a pattern. The way teachers sometimes asked if he really did his own homework. The way store clerks followed him even when he was in school uniform. The way security guards stared longer when he wore a hoodie. The taser just made visible what he'd felt for years. The next morning, something unexpected happened. A young woman named Camille, an ex-girlfriend of Officer Kane, came forward publicly. She posted a video on her Instagram account, explaining why she couldn't stay silent anymore. She revealed that Kane had a history of aggressive behavior, especially toward people of color, that he often joked about street clearing, and once told her that sometimes people need to be reminded who's in charge. She had no physical evidence, but her story added to a growing pile of concerns from inside and outside the force. Within hours, her video had nearly 1 million views, and it opened the floodgates. Former officers, ex-partners, and even a few civilians stepped forward anonymously to recount stories about Kane's temper, his quick fuse, and how complaints against him often got lost in the system. One anonymous source claimed Kane had received internal warnings twice in the last year for excessive language during traffic stops, but those files were quietly sealed. The people of Ridgecrest had heard enough. They gathered outside City Hall for what was now being called the March for Jordan. Students, pastors, nurses, small business owners, and entire families joined hands and walked from the high school to the police department. They didn't scream. They didn't riot. They walked in silence, carrying printed photos of Jordan's smiling graduation portrait. At the front of the march was Jordan himself. He didn't carry a sign. He didn't make a speech. But his presence was louder than any words. When they reached the station steps, he stood facing the building where he'd been written off, profiled, violated. And then something powerful happened. One by one, students from Ridgecrest High came forward and placed their own acceptance letters, honor roll certificates, and graduation photos on the building steps. It was a message. We are not threats. We are scholars, and we will not be afraid to be seen. By that evening, a bombshell announcement dropped. The Ridgecrest Police Department placed Officer Brent Kane on unpaid administrative leave and confirmed that the district attorney would be reviewing charges for assault under color of authority. It wasn't yet justice, but it was movement. Jordan's parents held a press conference in their front yard. His mother, Denise, addressed the cameras directly. My son could have died over nothing, over a walk to his own celebration. You all saw it. The world saw it. We're not asking for special treatment. We're asking for fairness. We're asking for safety. We're asking for an America where a young black boy can walk with his head high and not be met with suspicion. That's not radical. That's humanity. Behind her, Jordan stood, still healing, still quiet, but no longer alone. That night, news broke that the Department of Justice had opened a civil rights inquiry into the Ridgecrest Police Department, and the state attorney general had issued a statement supporting full transparency and cooperation. Suddenly, it wasn't just about Kane. It was about the system that had allowed him to operate unchecked, about how many Jordans had suffered in silence, about how many officers had quietly looked the other way. Back at the Mitchell home, Jordan finally spoke to the camera for the first time since the incident. Sitting in his room, surrounded by childhood books and academic medals, he looked directly into the lens. I never wanted any of this. I wanted to give a speech at graduation, hug my parents, and eat cake with my little sister. That's it. But I can't change what happened. I can only speak on it. I didn't deserve what happened to me, and neither does the next kid. So if you're watching this, remember me. Yeah, but remember why. Not because I'm special, but because I shouldn't have to be treated with respect. He paused. I'm just a kid who worked hard, who wanted better, who got hurt, but I'm still standing. And that video, it went viral. But not just for what he said, for how he said it. With grace, with strength, with a calm that refused to let his trauma define his entire story. As protests turned into policy proposals and anger turned into action, Jordan began meeting with local leaders, educators, and even law students who wanted to help him build something bigger. A scholarship fund, a legal clinic, a platform for students wronged by the system to share their stories. The scars were still fresh. The journey wasn't over, but something had shifted. The question was no longer, will Jordan be okay? It was, what will Jordan do next? And the town of Ridgecrest, once a quiet on the map, had become a symbol of what happens when silence is broken, when cameras roll, when people decide that enough is enough. As the days passed, the country continued watching, and Jordan, once just another name in a sea of headlines, had become a voice, a face, a fire, and it was only getting stronger.
Weeks had passed since the release of the Bodycam footage, but the echoes of what happened that day still reverberated across the nation. Jordan Mitchell's story had evolved from a local tragedy into a national conversation. No longer just a victim, he had become a symbol of something deeper. Something people weren't just watching but rallying behind. And as the news cycle continued to churn with stories of injustice and resistance, Jordan remained in the center. Not because he asked to be, but because his voice had become impossible to ignore. In Washington, senators cited his name during committee hearings on police accountability. Civil rights groups used his image in campaigns about the dangers of over-policing. And college campuses from New York to Los Angeles held student-led forums titled, "Walking While Black, the Jordan Mitchell Case." But while the world debated policy and legislation, Jordan quietly prepared for a different milestone, his graduation ceremony. It had been postponed once, then delayed again, but now it was finally happening. This time, nothing would steal that moment from him. The school board, in a unanimous vote, chose to hold the ceremony not inside the gymnasium like in years past, but outside on the football field to accommodate the growing number of attendees. Thousands of chairs were set up. Extra security was brought in, not to monitor the students, but to ensure that no threats from outside the community would disrupt the day. What was once a small-town graduation had become a televised event, and at the center of it all was Jordan. As he stood behind the stage, dressed once again in his black cap and gown, he felt a swirl of emotions. Nervousness, pride, gratitude, and something heavier, something that felt like responsibility. He wasn't just speaking to his class anymore. He was speaking to a country watching closely, hoping for a sign that healing was possible. When his name was called, the crowd erupted into a standing ovation. People weren't just clapping, they were crying. Parents, students, strangers, all on their feet. Some held signs. Some held each other. But every eye was fixed on the young man who had faced the weight of a broken system and stood up anyway. Jordan took the podium, adjusted the mic, and looked out across the sea of faces. "Good evening," he began, his voice steady. "Today is supposed to be about endings. The end of high school. The end of childhood. The end of one chapter before a new one begins. But for me, and maybe for a lot of us, this feels like a beginning." He paused, glancing down at the speech he had written and rewritten a dozen times. "I want to talk about choices. Not just the ones we make, but the ones that are made for us. I didn't choose to become a headline. I didn't choose to be tossed, thrown to the ground, or humiliated in front of the world. But I do get to choose what happens next. And that's what this moment is really about." His classmates listened intently. Some were crying. Others stood still, motionless, caught in the raw honesty of his words. "I choose not to let that officer define me. I choose not to carry anger in my chest forever. I choose to walk forward, because my future is still mine." He looked up again, this time more confident. "I stand here not because of what happened, but in spite of it. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's that silence doesn't protect you. It only protects the people who benefit from your silence." The applause came like a wave, rolling, sustained, powerful. After the ceremony, as camera crews swarmed the field, Jordan stayed close to his family. His mother kissed his forehead. His father hugged him tightly. His little sister beamed with pride. For a few minutes, they weren't the Mitchells caught in a media storm. They were just a family, celebrating a son who had made it through the fire. But the fight wasn't over. Just 2 days later, the district attorney made a landmark announcement. Officer Brent Kane would be charged with felony assault under color of authority and misdemeanor falsification of a police report. It marked one of the first times in the state's history that a non-lethal use of force incident without an arrest or major injury had led to felony charges against an officer. The statement was direct. This department will not tolerate abuses of power. No badge, no uniform, and no oath makes a person above the law. The legal process began swiftly. Kane's attorney filed a motion to dismiss, claiming qualified immunity and citing heightened tensions at the time of the incident. But public opinion was not on his side. The footage was clear. The lies in his initial report, where he falsely claimed Jordan was aggressively approaching, had already been disproven. The judge denied the motion, and so the trial was set. Meanwhile, Jordan made a decision that shocked many. He declined to pursue a civil lawsuit, for now. When asked why, he explained that justice, for him, wasn't about money. It was about making sure no other kid had to go through what he did. Instead of hiring a high-profile attorney, he partnered with a nonprofit legal organization to establish the Jordan Initiative, a fund that would provide legal aid, therapy resources, and college scholarships to teens affected by police misconduct. Within 24 hours of launching, the initiative had raised over $750,000. Celebrities matched donations. Influencers shared his video. And fellow students from around the country reached out with their own stories, some eerily similar to his. Jordan responded to every one of them. He also began visiting schools. Quietly, without press. He would sit in classrooms and talk about what it felt like to be profiled, what it meant to stay calm when your body screamed to run, how to know your rights. But more than that, he spoke about resilience. Pain is loud, he told one class of middle schoolers, but healing doesn't have to be silent. By the time summer arrived, Jordan had been accepted into multiple Ivy League schools. Each had not only offered him admission, but full scholarships. Still, he remained undecided.
Then, on a warm July afternoon, he appeared on a nationally televised panel discussion about race, youth, and justice. Seated between a U.S. senator and a Pulitzer Prize-winning author, Jordan looked every bit the part of the future leader he was quickly becoming. When asked where he'd be headed that fall, he smiled and finally answered, "Howard University," he said, "because I want to be somewhere that understands me before I have to explain myself." The crowd erupted in applause. Howard confirmed that Jordan would join the freshman class as a presidential scholar, studying political science and pre-law. But back in Ridgecrest, the trial of Brent Kane was moving forward. The courtroom was packed on the first day. Journalists lined the steps. Protesters held up photos of Jordan. But Jordan wasn't present. He had already said what he needed to say, and this time, it was the system's turn to speak. The prosecution presented the footage, the audio, the conflicting reports. They played Jordan's speech, introduced testimony from Camille, and even brought in use of force experts who unanimously concluded that Kane had violated not just department policy, but human decency. The defense argued that Kane feared for his life, but no weapons were found, no threats made, no sudden movements. The jury deliberated for 2 days, and then came the verdict. Guilty on both counts. Brent Kane was sentenced to 3 years in state prison and 5 years of probation. His badge was revoked permanently. The judge called his actions a disgrace to the uniform and an assault on the trust between community and officer. Jordan was on campus when the verdict came in. He didn't jump. He didn't shout. He just closed his eyes and exhaled. The weight wasn't gone, but it had shifted. Later that evening, he posted a single message to his social media. Accountability isn't vengeance. It's the first step toward healing. And that message was shared over 1 million times. In the months that followed, Ridgecrest began transforming. The police department underwent a full audit. Multiple officers resigned or were reassigned. The city council passed a community oversight ordinance, and a new police chief, one known for reform and community work, was appointed. The schools adopted new curriculum focused on civil rights and policing history. Jordan's old high school named their student leadership building in his honor, the Jordan Mitchell Center for Civic Empowerment. But perhaps the most powerful moment came one crisp October morning when Jordan returned to Ridgecrest to speak at a town hall. This time, he stood not as a student, not as a victim, but as a voice of change. He didn't speak about pain. He spoke about possibility. Ridgecrest taught me that broken things can be rebuilt, he said. That justice delayed doesn't always mean justice denied, and that a single voice can create an echo that changes the world. And just like that, Jordan's journey, from a walk home in a graduation gown to the steps of reform and leadership, came full circle. Not because the world had suddenly become fairer, but because he refused to stop walking. And in doing so, he reminded us all, there's no force stronger than truth, no power greater than the courage to speak it. Especially when it comes from someone who was never supposed to be heard. And now he is